It had been half a year since I turned my back on our life in Georgia, shutting the door on everything that once was. I didn't look back. Not when I packed the car, not when I left the house keys on the counter, and not when I told my son we were leaving his father behind for good. Nathan was silent during the drive, watching the pine trees blur past as we carved our way toward North Carolina. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. We escaped the weight of bourbon-soaked nights and bruised silences, my husband's anger no longer confined to harsh words. The day that rage turned toward our boy, I didn't hesitate. I chose to protect him, even if it meant unraveling everything. Now, life is quieter here, but it carries its own heaviness. I work double shifts at a roadside cafe just outside Asheville. The kind of place where the biscuits are homemade and the same dozen regulars keep your coffee cup full of stories. It's far from glamorous, but it's honest. The money barely stretches, but we make it work. Mostly because of my son. Mason is 19 now. Broad-shouldered, thoughtful, and months away from crossing that invisible line between adolescence and whatever manhood means in this world. There's a calm to him that catches me off guard sometimes. A steadiness in his voice, the way his hands fix what's broken around the house without needing to be asked. The porch light, the shaky cabinet door, the broken hinge on the gate, all done, quietly. And his hugs, those meant something. He'd pull me in without warning, arms strong around my back, chin resting lightly on my shoulder, like I was something worth sheltering. He'd call me his queen on occasion, a teasing grin tugging at his mouth. I'd scoff, but it never failed to stir something soft in me. Something that made me forget how lonely I'd become. It was a Thursday, April by the calendar, but it felt like July. The heat clung to the walls of our duplex, windows cracked but no breeze to speak of. I stepped out to the driveway with 2 glasses of lemonade, beads of condensation slipping down the sides. Mason was crouched beside his motorcycle, elbow-deep in tools and engine parts, sweat shining on his brow. "You've been at it forever," I said, handing him a glass. He looked up, smile bright, a smear of grease across his cheek. "Almost done. Gotta get her perfect by Sunday." "Sunday?" He nodded, eyes gleaming. "Taking you on a ride. Just us. There's a scenic loop through the mountains. Wait till you see it." I laughed, unsure. "You know I'm not exactly leather and handlebars material." "That's the point," he said, fingers brushing mine as he took the glass. His touch lingered, not long enough to be certain, but just long enough to make me look away. That night, while I was folding a basket of laundry in my bedroom, I heard a soft knock. Mason stepped in, holding a letter. This came in the mail. I took it from him, recognizing the attorney's letterhead. My breath caught. "He's contesting the terms," Mason said quietly, not needing to read it aloud. "Trying to force you back." My hands trembled. "You read it?" I didn't mean to, but yeah, I did. I could hear the edge in his voice, protective, focused, different. "He doesn't get to touch our life again," he said. "Not while I'm here." I tried to ease the worry from my face, to smile through it. But the way Mason stood there, his frame blocking the doorway like a shield, made my heart flutter, uncertain, unprepared. "I'm not a boy anymore, Mom," he said, eyes steady. "You don't have to carry all this alone." And something shifted in that moment. The air grew tighter, the room smaller. Not in fear, but in awareness. Something unspoken was beginning to breathe between us. The next night, sleep was a stranger. I lay awake, tracing cracks in the ceiling, the letter on my dresser casting a shadow that wouldn't fade. Thoughts of courtrooms and confrontation churned in my chest, but beneath all that, beneath the dread, there was something else. That look in Mason's eyes. That voice, calm and sure. It echoed through me like the first drop of rain on dry soil. When I returned home the next evening, the diner's grease still clinging to my apron, the house was mostly dark. But the kitchen glowed with soft, golden light. Mason was at the counter, slicing vegetables with practiced ease. "You cooked?" I asked, slipping off my shoes. "You've been on your feet all day." He glanced up with a small smile. "Besides, I wanted to talk. His tone had gravity. I sat slowly as he pushed a plate toward me. Simple food, but arranged like it mattered. We ate in quiet, forks clinking against ceramic, the hum of the fridge filling the space. Every time I looked up, Mason was watching me, not in that fleeting, passive way, but deeply. Like he was waiting to see if I noticed something he hadn't said yet. When the plates were cleared, he leaned back, arms folding behind his head, stretching. The sleeves of his t-shirt pulled tight across his arms. I meant what I said last night, he began, voice low. I'm not letting him come near you again. Not ever, Mason said, voice edged with steel. I swallowed hard. Mason, it's not your fight to. The hell it isn't. His tone cut sharper than I expected. I was there, Mom. I saw what he did. I remember it all. You think that kind of thing just disappears. His words hit like a wave I hadn't braced for. Suddenly, I was back in that old kitchen, the sound of glass breaking, the heat of his rage burning the air between us. I blinked quickly, forcing the memory back down. I just don't want you stuck in this mess, I said, barely above a whisper. He leaned forward across the table, resting his forearms on the wood like he wasn't going to let me hide anymore. His eyes didn't flinch. I've been in it, Mom. Since I was old enough to step between you and him. I'm already in this. The space between us seemed to draw tighter, the edges of the kitchen blurred by shadow, the low hum of the fridge the only other sound. My pulse thudded in my ears, not from fear, but from the sheer force of his presence. You've carried this on your own for so long, he said gently. But you don't have to. Not anymore. There was no hint of the boy who used to sulk about chores or leave wet towels on the floor. This was a man sitting across from me, solid and sure in his convictions. Something inside me shifted then, subtle but permanent. I saw him in a new light, not just as my child, but as the only person who had never wavered when everything else fell apart. The sound of soft rain against the windows pulled me back, grounding me in the moment. I stood abruptly, gathering our dishes in an attempt to shake off the heaviness. But as I reached past him, my arm brushed his, and the contact sent a ripple through me I couldn't ignore. He noticed. I knew it because his fingers paused mid-reach, and his gaze lifted to meet mine, still steady, still calm, but filled with something I hadn't seen before. Something waiting. We didn't speak, but the air between us shifted, charged and tight like standing too close to the edge of something you're not sure you should want. And I knew, instinctively, undeniably, that the next time we touched, it wouldn't be accidental. Sunday morning came dressed in light, the kind of clear golden glow that begged for movement, for something bold. I woke to the low rumble of Mason's motorcycle outside, the sound curling through the early stillness like a promise. He was already out front when I stepped onto the porch, helmet in hand, looking like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. You ready? He asked, voice low and warm. I nodded, the helmet smooth and cool in my hand. Our fingers brushed as he passed it to me, his eyes catching mine and holding for a second longer than necessary. I looked away first. Mounting the bike was awkward at first, muscle memory I never had. I hesitated before resting my hands on his waist, but the heat of the leather under my palms felt oddly grounding. You'll need to hold tighter than that, he said with a smirk over his shoulder. I did. As soon as we hit the open road, the world blurred around us, the wind wrapping us in its dry embrace, the scent of earth and asphalt riding along. I pressed in closer, every curve and shift drawing us tighter. My chest against his back, our bodies moving as one with the machine beneath us. He was steady, confident. Every turn of his hands told me I was safe. After nearly an hour, he slowed and turned off the highway onto a narrow dirt trail. The trees opened to a hilltop overlooking a broad stretch of river, sunlight rippling on the surface like gold. We dismounted in silence. He pulled off his helmet, running a hand through his hair, and turned to me. So, I exhaled, a little breathless, intense. He smiled. Good. I wanted it to feel like something. I set my helmet down, brushing a lock of hair from my cheek. "And what exactly were you hoping I'd feel?" He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that I felt the warmth of him in the air between us. The scent of leather and the faint sharpness of cologne hit me at once. "That you're safe," he said. "That I've got you always." Something cracked open inside me, gentle, but deep. Not a collapse. A surrender. To the truth I'd buried too long. He wasn't just the boy I raised. He was the one who'd always seen me. The only one who'd never asked me to be less. The quiet between us thickened, stretched tight with unspoken knowing. I could hear my heartbeat like a drum, matching the slow clench of his jaw as his eyes searched mine. This time, I didn't look away. We stood there, caught in something deeper than words, something that pulsed just beneath the skin. The kind of moment that doesn't announce itself, but settles around you with quiet certainty. The overlook was still, save for the rustle of wind through the trees and the low hush of the river below. I knew, the same way you know when a season changes, that this hill would mark something permanent in both our lives. Not because of what was said, but because of what had finally been felt. The light slanted across his face, golden and soft. It painted everything around us with the kind of beauty that doesn't last long. And in that fragile stillness, his hand brushed mine. I didn't move. Not because I didn't notice, but because, for once, I didn't feel the need to hide the weight of everything we'd been through. That simple contact wasn't loaded. It wasn't confusing. It was grounding, familiar, like reaching for someone when the world shifts under your feet and they're just there, holding steady. And for a breath, I let myself be held in that steadiness. Instead, my breath caught, and my eyes drifted to his lips before I could stop myself. He noticed for heartbeat. Neither of us moved. The air felt thick, the whole world narrowing down to the space between us. If he leaned in even an inch, I don't think I could have resisted. And maybe I didn't want to. But that was the exact moment I forced myself to break it. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I took a quick step back, tucking my hair behind my ear like it was nothing. "Nice view," I said, a little too brightly, eyes sweeping across the horizon like I hadn't just been lost in something else entirely. "You've got a knack for finding these places." He looked at me, half smile, half knowing, and I knew he saw right through the act. But he let it go. Let me step back into safer ground without calling me out on it. After a moment, he tilted his head, grin widening. "Ever thought about trying to drive it?" I blinked. "What, the bike?" "Yeah," he said, flipping the keys from his pocket, the metal catching the light as they spun between his fingers. "You've never tried. I'll be right there with you." I let out a soft laugh, more nerves than humor. "Mason, I wouldn't even know how to turn it on." "I'll show you," he said, already stepping toward the motorcycle. "Come on. Trust me." Those two words hit somewhere low and deep. And of course I nodded. I always did with him. Climbing onto the seat felt different this time. More deliberate. My hands wrapped around the handlebars, cool metal under my palms. I barely had time to settle in before I heard the crunch of gravel behind me, then Mason's weight shifting the bike slightly as he swung his leg over and settled behind me. His hands came around to rest lightly on mine, guiding my fingers to the controls, his chest brushing my back. "Relax," he murmured near my ear, his voice low enough to tangle with the hum of the wind. It's all about balance. When the engine came to life under me, so did something else. Every movement was magnified, his studying hands over mine, the subtle shift of his legs against me. As we found our rhythm, we pulled onto the empty dirt road, the bike swaying slightly until I got the hang of it. He stayed close, speaking soft instructions, his breath warm against my cheek. The scent of leather, the low rumble of the engine, the feeling of him pressed just enough to remind me he was there. It all blurred together into something I couldn't quite name. The road stretched out before us in a ribbon of gold-lit dust, and the world seemed to slow. The sky was painted in pinks and oranges, and I felt free, not just from my past, not just from fear, but from every rule I'd written for myself. And with him behind me, his touch steady, his voice a quiet anchor in my ear, it felt achingly, impossibly romantic. By the time we rolled to a stop, I didn't want it to end. My hands stayed on the bars, my body still leaning back into him. He didn't move either, and for a moment it felt like we were suspended there in the fading light, caught between what was and what could be. The ride back from the overlook was quiet, not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that lingers beneath the skin, full of things neither of us needed to say aloud. It was the hush that follows something important, when words would only dilute what's already been felt. The wind had long since settled, and the glow of the sunset gave way to twilight as we turned onto our street. The houses were quiet, porch lights flickering on one by one. Everything felt slower, softer. When we pulled into the driveway, I eased off the throttle and let the engine die. For a moment, we didn't move. The soft ticking of the bike's frame as it cooled was the only sound between us, like it too was catching its breath. We sat there, still, both of us caught in that fragile pause between what had been and whatever came next. The world felt suspended, like it hadn't quite decided how to begin again. Caleb didn't move right away. His hands stayed lightly on my hips, almost as if he wasn't ready to let go. When he finally stepped off, he offered me his hand like I might still need help, though I knew I didn't. I took it anyway. Inside, the house felt strangely smaller, like the quiet had folded in on itself. The echoes of the road clung to my skin, the hum of the engine, the wind, the memory of being held steady when I wasn't sure I could balance on my own. I set the helmet down on the counter, fingers brushing the strap like it still carried his reassurance. "You did good out there," Mason said behind me, his voice softer than I'd heard it in weeks. I turned, aiming for something casual. "Good?" I didn't even stall. He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, that steady gaze settling on me with more weight than the words themselves. My pulse stumbled. I turned away, busying myself with the ritual of pouring 2 glasses of water, something safe, familiar, still. "I still think it's safer with you driving," I said, reaching for normal. "Maybe," he replied, "but you should have seen yourself. You were smiling the whole time." I paused for a fraction of a second before brushing it off. I was just enjoying the view. His voice came low, barely above the hum of the fridge. So was I. The words caught somewhere deep, stirring something I didn't have a name for. That feeling of being noticed, not as tired or worn down or surviving, but something more whole. I turned toward him, and for a beat, neither of us moved. The air between us felt thick again. Not dangerous, just dense with everything unsaid. Like we were both standing in the stillness after a storm, waiting to see what would grow in its place. I wanted to thank him for the ride, for the space, for letting me feel like I was something more than just what I'd escaped. But nothing came out. So I lifted the glass to my lips and took a slow sip, hoping it would steady the rhythm of my heart. He stepped closer then, just enough to make me aware of every inch. "If you ever want to go again," he said, his voice warm and certain. "Just say the word. Doesn't matter where. I'll take you." I nodded, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would give away too much. That night, lying in bed, the silence felt almost electric, like the whole house had gone still, but something inside me hadn't stopped moving. My thoughts drifted back to the open road, the way the wind wrapped around us, the sun dipping low behind the trees. And him, his steady voice guiding me, calm and close, his presence like a quiet anchor. There was something about that ride I couldn't shake. The way I'd let go just for a while. The trust it took. The freedom it gave. I shifted beneath the covers, the sheets tangled at my knees. The air was warm, the ceiling fans spinning lazy circles overhead, but it didn't cool the current that still hummed beneath my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back there, his hands gently adjusting mine on the handlebars, the faint vibration of his voice in my ear, the subtle weight of him behind me as I leaned back, just enough to feel that I wasn't alone. I turned onto my side, the shadows shifting across the wall in slow, ghostly waves. I tried to let the rhythm of the fan lull me to sleep, but my mind wouldn't settle. Not after everything that had been stirred awake. That's when I heard the soft creak of my bedroom door. I thought maybe I'd imagined it until I saw his silhouette framed in the faint light from the hallway. He didn't say anything, just stepped inside and quietly shut the door behind him. My breath caught. Caleb moved with a slow certainty, crossing the room until he was right beside my bed. Then, instead of sitting on it, he lowered himself onto the floor, leaning back against the side, his arm resting casually on his bent knee. The closeness felt heavier in the quiet. We sat like that for a moment, the darkness wrapping around us. I could hear his breathing, steady and calm, and my own quicker than it should have been. Then he tilted his head, his voice low and unhurried. "What do you like better?" He paused, and I felt his eyes on me, even though I couldn't quite see them. "When you sat behind me on the motorcycle, or when I was behind you?" The question landed deep, sending a slow rush of heat through me. My fingers curled in the sheets, my mind flipping through flashes of both moments. The thrill of clinging to him as the world flew past, and the intoxicating awareness of him pressed against me, his hands guiding mine. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Why are you asking me that?" He gave a faint smile. I could hear in his tone. "Just curious." But I knew it wasn't just curiosity. The air between us tightened, charged with everything we weren't saying. I shifted under the covers, the fabric whispering against my skin, and I felt his attention sharpen. I could have answered him honestly. I could have told him exactly which moment had made my pulse race harder. Instead, I looked away, though he couldn't see my face in the dark. "I don't know," I murmured, my voice too soft, too shaky. I felt rather than saw the way he leaned a little closer. "I think you do." The heat rose higher, curling low in my stomach. My heart was loud in my ears. I wanted to break the moment, but I couldn't seem to move. Not away from him. The quiet stretched between us, thick enough to touch. I could sense his eyes on me in the dark, steady and unblinking, and it made my pulse beat faster. "You think I do?" I asked finally, my voice low. He gave a small huff of amusement. "Yeah, I think you've been thinking about it just as much as I have." I let out a soft laugh. Too quiet to be casual, too shaky to be confident. "And what makes you so sure you're on my mind? Because I know the look you get when you're holding something back," he said, his tone the mix of certainty and challenge. "You had it on the hill earlier, and when you were driving." I pulled the blanket a little higher, half as a shield and half because his words made me feel suddenly exposed. Maybe I was just nervous. He leaned his head back against the side of the bed, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of him through the fabric. "You weren't nervous," he said softly. "You were enjoying it." I hesitated, my lips parting to answer, but nothing came out. He chuckled under his breath like he'd caught me. "I liked it better when you were in front," he added, his voice dropping lower. That earned him a glance for me, even in the dim light. "Oh, and why is that?" His eyes found mine, and even in the shadows, I could see the glint there. "Because I could see your smile. Because I could feel you leaning back into me like you didn't want any space between us." The air felt suddenly too warm. My heartbeat too loud. "You're awfully sure of yourself," I murmured. "Only when I'm right," he teased. I shook my head, but it wasn't to deny him. It was to keep from giving myself away completely. "You're impossible." "And yet," he said with a faint smile, "you're not telling me I'm wrong." I opened my mouth to answer, but he shifted then, turning so he was kneeling beside the bed, one hand braced lightly on the mattress. His face was closer now, the shadows softening the sharp lines of his features. "You know," he said quietly, almost like a secret. "You could just tell me." I swallowed hard, my breath catching. "Tell you what, that you felt it too." The way he said it low, certain pulled something loose inside me. My hand moved without thinking, resting on the edge of the mattress near his. Neither of us spoke. The space between us was so small now that I could feel the faint brush of his breath against my cheek. And then he closed it. His lips touched mine in the barest, gentlest kiss. Just a touch, brief, uncertain, but carrying all the weight of what had gone unsaid between us all day. It barely lasted a second, but the warmth it left behind lingered like a spark caught in my chest, enough to leave me breathless.